see me, folks, because I'm the afterlife's leading BioExorcist. Yes, there is. Come on down here, and I want to tell you, I'll do anything. I'll scare them real bad. The point is, folks, I'm going to do anything to get your business. Hell, I'll possess myself if I gotta. Whoa! Yo! I got demons running all through me.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall of our memory, we grab a copy off the shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Hola.
And together we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. So Mike, I think we picked an appropriate time to do a nostalgia podcast, don't you?
I think this is amazing marketing by both of us.
It's amazing because, when we decided to do this in the first place, we thought we'd be in our own little cocoon, our little bubble, insulated from the modern mess of modern movies and just kind of be in our own little space. But we've become annoyingly relevant, you might say. Just about every movie we've covered is either a remake or a reboot or a sequel that's in modern theaters now. And suddenly our little niche has become invaded by modern movies. So
tourists, as they say in Fight Club.
Tourists, exactly. We've got no other better example than what we're going to review for this week's show. We're going to be talking about Beetlejuice from 1988.
That's right. Just recently opening up in theaters. 36
long
years
awaited,
later.
I guess, sequel is out in theaters as we speak. I just kind of went through our show catalog here, and I'm thinking even when we started, just about everything's been remade or sequeled. Twister, Roadhouse, Planet of the Apes, Dune. I mean, just go down the list, Mike.
I know.
Most of the movies we've covered have been remade or franchised out in some weird way.
Still waiting on my Battlefield Earth reimagining.
Well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Okay, yeah.
But it's interesting because it's like I feel like when you're a kid and you find that weird band that you really like and you think this is my little band, and then the next thing you know somebody's listening to it in the hallway and and then everybody's listening to it. It's like my little thing's gone. I kind of feel that way sometimes, Mike. But
I'm the same way. It's like when something becomes popular, you feel like, oh, I don't like it now. They sold out.
Yeah, imagine the narcissism of appropriating entire decades worth of movies just for yourself. There's your host, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we're going to talk about Beetlejuice. This is a fun one. Let's just kind of jump in, Mike, because we got things to do, right?
That's right. I'm sure the people listening have things to do.
They got better things to do, of course. So this is a pity listen, I'm sure, but let's get started. So this is directed by Tim Burton, who we've covered several of his movies, Mike.
The good and the bad.
The good and the bad. We have a love-hate relationship with Mr. Burton, former Disney animator. This was originally offered to Wes Craven, believe it or not, Mike. But
oh my gosh.
He did real horror movies instead. Written by a guy named Michael McDonnell, not from the Doobie Brothers, Mike. He also wrote the couple other horror movies. He wrote Thinner, which is a Stephen King adaptation. It's pretty neat movie. Tales from the Dark Side. We lost him at age 49, which is kind of a sad story. It was also co-written by a guy named Warren Scarron, who wrote Batman, the Tim Burton Batman, Beverly Hills Cop 2. And we lost him at 44, Mike. So
oh my gosh.
The Beetlejuice curse lives, Mike.
They die in an accident of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. This had a $15 million budget and was released on March 30th, not very seasonal, 1988. Back when we were, 17 years old?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, so this is has contributed significantly to pop culture over the years, given Keaton's iconic performance. That's what everybody really remembers. But there's a whole other players that bring this movie to life. So, Mike, why don't you walk us through some of those cast members that helped brought this to the screen?
Well, we have the Maitlands, who are the couple that start off of the movie. They're played by Gina Davis and a very hairy-chested Alec Baldwin, who luckily doesn't handle a gun in this movie.
You soon, Mike.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there's still litigation going on, so I need to hush up. And they're the couple that become our ghost that we interact with through the movie.
Mhm.
And somebody moves in their house. A young golf girl, Lydia, played by an American accented Winona Ryder, and
Much better.
yeah, but she's part of the Deets family, which includes Dean Rooney and Kevin's mom, Catherine O'Hara, and Jeffrey Jones. Who, the less I say about Jeffrey Jones, the better.
A little bit of trouble there.
Yeah, his career kind of took a weird trajectory where he was in like Amadeus, and then later on he's in Who's Your Caddy.
Don't forget Mom and Dad Save the World. Great movie.
Yeah, well, that was still pre. Let's call it CP.
Yeah.
Or KP, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so Jeffrey Jones was kind of if anyone watching the sequel wonders why he's, not in the movie. He is still alive, but there's a reason for that. Who else is it? We have Otho, who's, he's like the Johnny character from Airplane, the Steven Stucker guy that comes, he really adds a lot of comedy to the movie, and he's played by Glenn Shaddix, who was also in Demolition Man as Associate Bob.
Yeah.
And
sadly, well dressed. Yeah.
Yes, sadly he passed away. But at his funeral, they played the Calypso song, Deo. Believe it or not. There's some I call this Tim Burton cast stunts or stunt casting where he has these people in movies, and you'll see it like in some of his movies like Edward Scissorhands and the movie about the what was it, House of Long Shadows or something like that. He does this, even Ed Wood, where he had Martin Landau, but he brings back a lot of famous faces from TV and is able to put them in these roles. Like in this movie, he has Robert Goulet and Dick Cavett,
Great.
And anybody knows about Dick Cavett. He was like the king of the late night show, like Tom Schneider. He had this, talk. He was really good at talking. He even had an HBO series where he talked about different decades and years, and anyone from the 70s would know him. But like you're watching this in 1988, most kids watching are like, who's that guy? Who's Dick Cavett?
Yeah. And
Robert Goulet, even more obscure. He was like a lounge. He's like part Canadian lounge singer. Really kind of he's kind of like the guy that Bill Murray would play, in the Saturday Night Live sketches where he was like the greasy lounge singer. That was Robert Goulet.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Elvis Presley actually had famously shot his TV when he saw Robert Goulet because he hated him so much. So, thought you think that was funny.
It happens.
It happens. Sylvia Sidney, she plays the Maitland's caseworker. She's older lady, but she was like a big star of the 30s and 40s. And I don't know how Tim Burton comes up with, like I said, it's these casts. He just comes up with these people that, and she makes the movie in a way. It's just her role. I know is just minor, but it's so well done. And of course, you have Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. He's hardly in the movie at all, but oh my gosh, every scene he's in, you're just laughing. I mean, it's great. I know a lot of it's probably was ad-libbed at the time, and he went from being in like Mr. Mom and Gung Ho, and then all of a sudden he's in this movie, and he's it's the reason the movie's so good. And then I want to mention Harry Belafonte. He's not in the movie, but his music is prominently featured, and you can't think of this movie without thinking of the Banana Boat song, or
you don't hear a lot of clips though anymore, do you?
Jumping the Line. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's just like it's eponymous with this movie, and it's by the way, it was a idea from Jeffrey Jones to have that song in the movie, so he did do something good. But there you go. That's your cast.
All right, thanks, Mike. Good job. So Alec Baldwin's in this movie, about 90 pounds less of him, and with his oddly brown hair with blonde highlights, he barely recognizable.
Feathered, yeah. He had the Andy Travis from WKRP hair.
Yeah, Bill Pullman auditioned for this role, but Alec Baldwin got it. Sammy Davis Jr. was Burton's original choice to play Beetlejuice.
My gosh.
Michael Keaton came in and got the role. I agree with you, Mike. He's far and away the best part of this movie. His performance, all 14 minutes of it. So he's only on screen 14 minutes.
Yes.
It's his favorite movie he's ever done. To this day, he still attests to that. He got to ad-lib about 90% of his dialogue, Mike. So to your point, so that was good. Gina Davis's role was auditioned with Kirstie Alley originally. She passed on the project. Winona Ryder was going to many young Hollywood actresses auditioned for this. This is her second film. I think her premiere was the movie Lucas.
Oh yeah,
But
Corey
Alyssa
Haim.
Milano and Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street were also considered for the role. This was the first DVD ever sent out by Netflix. The first one ever sent out in the mail. So
Wow.
neat little DVD and mail. A lot of people don't even know what that is anymore.
Well, yeah.
The film's B-movie tacky look was intentional because they only had $1 million in special effects money. So they decided just to go cheap with it. And it does have a unique look, that's for sure. Beetlejuice was inspired by Chop Top Mosley's role in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Remember Chop Top in that movie?
I've seen a stills or two from that.
Very subtle, understated performance by that. You mentioned Otho. John Goodman and Bob Hoskins were also considered for that role. Yeah, but Glenn got it. Passed away in 2010, sadly. But just overall, just a very quirky, hard to explain movie. And we'll kind of get to that as we go. This came out in 1988, Mike. So what do you remember about 1988? Not a lot, I'm guessing. This came out on March 30th, as I mentioned. Other movies in the theater in March that year were Police Academy 5.
Ugh.
I forget what the subtitle of that was, but something, maybe at the beach, Miami, whatever.
Somewhere.
Also in theaters that month were Biloxi Blues. Matthew met his then girlfriend, now wife, Sarah Jessica Parker, on the set. Yeah. Had a little problem in a car on the way home from one of those shooting days, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, he should not be driving a vehicle.
Yeah. He also had Johnny Be Good, Mike. Remember that movie with Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall, the football epic. Really good one.
Epic.
Yeah. 1988 was a big year for movies, of course. That was the year Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, was the #1 movie that year. Coming to America, I think that was the James's first date night, right?
That was it. Yeah, summer of '88.
I remember. I listened. My wife taught me how to listen. She trained me, Mike. Good Morning Vietnam was #3 that year. Big, Tom Hanks was #4, and Crocodile Dundee was out that year.
Amazing comedies. It's rattled out like 5 or 6 like just iconic comedies, you know.
And those comedies were the top 5 gross that year. When was the last time you heard of comedies being at the top of the charts there? Beetlejuice was #10 that year, and Rain Man won the Academy Award for Best Picture that year.
I'm definitely not wearing my underwear.
Definitely. On the music scene, Mike, we always love talking about music, especially in the 80s. You had, this is just a murderer's row of snarky great hits. Get Out of My Dreams and In My Car was on the chart this week. The movie came out. Endless Summer Nights by Richard Marx, not Carl. I can't get that right anymore after I made that gaffe.
That's right.
Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Michael Bolton.
Mr. Remake.
This is the guy from Office Space actually sang this one. the real Michael Bolton.
Why don't you just go by Mike instead of Michael?
No way. Why should I change? He's the one who sucks.
Check It Out by John Mellencamp. I think he was John Cougar then, or he might have been John Cougar Mellencamp.
I think it was John Cougar Mellencamp in that iteration.
Yeah. Saw Him Standing There by Tiffany.
Oh, wow.
Sci-fi movie veteran Tiffany. Like, see what they did there, Mike? She changed the sex of she gendered it.
Oh, yeah.
So she stole a Beatles song.
It's creative.
Standing him there.
Actually, it was a Tommy James and the Shondells.
Yeah. Well, that's just part of the genius of Tiffany to repurpose a song like that and then play it in a mall for a bunch of girls.
I was thinking, I think we're alone now. Yeah, you're right. I saw her standing there was Beatles. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
She was as good as Michael Bolton at remaking stuff.
Yeah. It's not exactly a cultural renaissance of music in 1988, Mike, and it caps it all off with She's Like the Wind, starring our Roadhouse favorite, Patrick Swayze.
He could do it all, couldn't he? He could do it all.
And that song's going to be in your head tomorrow, gang, and you're welcome. Some other things going on in 1988 that I thought were kind of weird. It was the year they discovered the world's largest leatherback turtle washed up on the shores of Wales, England. It was 100 years old and 9 foot long.
Wow.
And probably delicious.
Nice soup.
Yeah. Table tennis became an Olympic sport that year, changing life as we know it. And this is the first year that CDs outsold vinyl for the first time.
Oh, wow.
beginning of the end, Mike.
It was.
The irony there is that now vinyl outsells CD.
Yeah. And cassette tapes are left in the junk pile.
There's still a market for those, though. That's weird because I told you a couple episodes ago about my 5,000 piece CD collection.
So
no one's hit me up on Facebook Marketplace. Appreciate it, that audience. I was really counting on you to bail me out on that one. Price to move, guys. But yeah, when I look at my music message boards, there's a bit of a subculture for not 8-tracks, but regular cassette tapes. Like, how impractical is that?
I don't even know how to play a cassette tape anymore.
Who's got Sony Walkman in the closet, I suppose.
You know what's even better when they came out with cassette singles. That was even stupid.
Oh, what a genius play, right? Yeah. You buy an entire cassette and then it have a B-side, just like a regular 45, right? Back in the day.
Yeah.
But $13 worth of plastic for 2 3-minute songs. You'd have to take out and turn around and rewind. It's fantastic. All right. Well, I think we've kind of commiserated about 1988 long enough, Mike. We should probably get back to the point at hand here. Let's talk about Beetlejuice.
That's right.
So I say we turn on the juice and see what shakes loose. What do you say, Mike?
Yeah, just need a little gasoline and a blowtorch.
All right. Hit the button. So our movie opens up with a very beautiful New England countryside. We see Barbara and Adam, Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, respectively. They live in this giant New England style cottage, and they're taking a staycation for a week just to kind of renovate the house. And Alec's got a nice little HO scale model of the entire town they live in the attic. He's building the scale model. And they decide they're going to drive into town to get some paint brushes and some paint to help on this model. And they get in the car and
you know what happens after that?
Yeah. A dog swerves in front of the car, right in front of a covered bridge, and then they just cut to them walking back into the house wet. And this is where things go kind of a little weird. They look in their reflection, Mike, and they don't see anything. And then they look at each other and they realize that they don't remember how they got home. And then they open the door, and suddenly it's Tim Burton clowns and sandworms. They're in the middle of the desert.
Whoa, sandworms. You hate them, right? I hate them myself. Come on.
It's kind of a neat, I don't know, kind of a transformation. And all they do is they play the song. It sounds like the Death March, dun, dun, and then they enter their house, and you're like, oh wait, something's weird. And it's kind of cool the way they did it.
It almost sounds redundant saying this, but the Danny Elfman score here is just it's almost its own character, because this ethereal march that plays, I mean, it's just synonymous with this movie. It's creepy, it's atmospheric, and it really just conveys emotion and all that as they go. But they realize that they're dead, Mike, and that's confirmed by they see a book on the countertop that says the handbook for the recently deceased, and they come to the realization that they're dead.
Reads like stereo instructions.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously they're kind of having a problem with that, right? So unaware that they're dead or unsure how they return, they try to just manage how this has happened and realize that they're in a different plane of existence, and they kind of use the handbook a little bit to understand what it's about, and they meet some of the people in the afterlife, including Sylvia Sidney. I forget, what was her character's name? I forgot. So Juno, thank you.
She's a caseworker
Who is a chain smoker, and all the smoke exits to her slit throat, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yes, that was what was so creative about so much of this movie. Were
just the background, all the
characters. Just like the various deaths they were able to do makeup for and stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So they do their best trying to get by until, of course, the new owners come into their house. They're condemned to life in that house forever. And then it's invaded by a bunch of New York art proud elites, played by Jeffrey Jones and Catherine O'Hara, and their young daughter Lydia Dietz, played by Winona Ryder here. Winona Ryder didn't have to do much hair and makeup or wardrobe. This was she wore most of her own personal clothes. She was in her goth phase here, including her signature bangs, Mike. This was her hairstyle when she auditioned. So they didn't really have to do a lot for her when she was almost a perfect fit. They come to start to remodel their house in their New York elitist liberal postmodern Art Deco driving these guys crazy because they spent all this time reworking this house to American traditional style, and that's probably the worst part of this for them is the tackiness they feel of their new owners. They try to scare them out with their very minimal knowledge of how to be a ghost. It doesn't go well. They poke holes in their $8,000 sheets to no avail. They're not even seen, Mike, except by Lydia.
That's right.
They understand that they're being seen by her, so they kind of confront her as she goes upstairs in the attic to ask questions. And she had read the book earlier and says, well, she says that she's able to see them because she herself is strange and unusual, and that's just an iconic goth line.
Oh yeah.
But they make a play to her to say, look, you guys, you got to get your mom and dad out of this house. And but she's she's young, and she's her father's got her stepmother in there, Catherine O'Hara, and she's just a typical teenage angst girl, just miserable with life.
She's utterly alone.
Yeah. So as they're trying to figure out ways to deal with their predicament, they look into the scale model of the town, and they see in the cemetery this little tiny little figure. And then we zoom in very closely, and it's revealed. That's where we get the Beetlejuice reveal here, Mike. That they dig up the coffin there, and they hear this rumbling, and they dig up the cardboard that they scaled it appropriately in the rubber mat, and up pops Michael Keaton as our titular character here. I think I appreciated him more this time around because he's just an older guy like us, but everything he said cracked me up this time in a way it had never done before. So every little thing he said, I thought the first time he was just over the top, but I didn't really appreciate this performance. But this time it was much more well received by me, at least.
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think?
And he's trying to pitch them to hire him as a BioExorcist, which is a great term, to get rid of these. He said, I'll get rid of these people for you. But there's a catch to summoning him. You have to say his name 3 times. And they haven't figured that out yet. But they're told by Juno back at Death HQ that he's a bad seed, and they don't want anything to do with him. So they decided to figure out their own way. So that night where Lydia's parents are having a dinner party with Dick Cavett and Dick Cavett and some other New York art crowd. Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis make their big play to scare everybody out. And it involves possessing the entire team and making them sing Harry Belafonte's. So this Deo scene is extremely iconic. Everybody knows it's probably one of the top scenes of all time. It's silly. It's out of place. It makes no sense. And then it ends up with this really big scare at the end. But they after this event happens, they run back upstairs, completely content with themselves for scaring everybody off, only to find out that Lydia comes up and says the opposite effect has happened. They want to meet them, and they were thrilled they were thrilled by the whole experience, to the point where Jeffrey Jones wants to he was trying to retire there to a quiet life, and he's put his investor suit right back on. He wants to turn the house into an amusement park featuring the undead. And it's facilitated by Otho, which is Catherine's art house dealer friend, who's incredibly pretentious and just a typical New York snob. He knows everything, and he's insistent on being part of this business decision. So now we got a bigger problem, because now they want to take over the house and the entire town, and they're not scared. So when they're at their wits' ends, they decide, you know what, we've got to call Beetlejuice. So they open up the box, call Beetlejuice, and then things get really fun, Mike, and that opens the third act, where Beetlejuice is left to his own devices with no filters. He's let loose in the middle of a seance that Otho's doing to convert the house over. Beetlejuice comes out and literally scares the life out of Robert Goulet, and
just sends him up to the ceiling.
Yeah,
and he and his wife.
Yeah, and finally, convey the sense that this house is haunted, and this is evil. And the most terrible, thing of all is, of course, Otho's designer suits gets converted to a polyester leisure suit.
Yes,
sending him to a state of decay that he can no longer recover from. So in order to now they got Beetlejuice left and he's kind of taking hold of their life, in order to get rid of him, they have to submit to him marrying Lydia. It's just this real stream of consciousness stuff. The last few minutes, the last 20 minutes of this film are just who knows what happens. Like there, one thing I did notice, the justice of the peace.
Yeah.
That was played by little person actor Tony Cox. You might remember him from Bad Santa.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but they end up figuring out a way to dismiss Beetlejuice, sending him back to the afterlife. They send him outside. He gets swallowed by a sandworm, and then we see him in the waiting room at death, at Death Central, trying to get processed by Juno. And he's sitting next to an African hunter, a woman that's been eaten in half by a shark, and the famous shrunken head guy. And then they end the movie with a joyous rendition of Shake Sonora, and Lydia gets to fly around the house, and she's become their adopted daughter, and that's the movie. And that did absolutely no justice to it, Mike.
It's okay. Yeah, there were so many times I wanted to like add stuff in. I was like, no, you just let it go. It's
I tried to like make decent notes, but it was so stream of consciousness, and I want to kind of talk about that in terms of my review, that it's hard to follow because, well, let's just kind of get to that as we kind of do our little personal reviews. So, Mike, in terms of awards and accolades, this had an $8 million opening, not too bad. Did a $75 million domestic haul, did not have a worldwide release. It got an Oscar nomination for makeup. It did win.
Okay.
We mentioned that it gave birth to a sequel several years later.
Yeah.
It's in theaters now. I think they came out September 6th. You can go out and check that out. Cleverly titled Beetlejuice, with most of the cast returning except the principal players. It also gave birth to a Broadway show in 2019, which is really good. I've probably seen it. I've seen it like 3 times now, Mike. It's a good adaptation. It's a lot of fun. And I see a lot of these shows on Sunday matinees with a lot of people that sit around me with the season ticket holders, like these Sunday lunch ladies. They get together, the gals get together for lunch and a show. And I always like seeing their reaction to a lot of F words. So there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice doesn't hold back with some of his language in this show, and it's always fun to see that reaction from the audience.
I saw it. It's like one of its like original run in New York, and it was darker than the movie, but
yeah.
And it's more focused on death, which is interesting. But I know that was the original screenplay. I think was darker too. And
the original screenplay, like Winona Ryder kills herself to be on the other side, to be part of their life, and
they even had it like where Beetlejuice's henchman actually pushed Maitland's car off the bridge.
Yeah.
Instead of a cute little dog they have to avoid. It's like, wow, okay, that's pretty dark. Like he set up everything originally.
Quentin Tarantino's Beetlejuice.
I know, right? It's like, no. We need more comedies in 1988. Let's make a comedy.
It was a good year for comedies. That's certainly for sure. All right, so this is part of this show where we kind of talk about we call it our grumpy meter, guys. This is where we talk about the first time we saw this movie as younger men, and then we talk about our most recent watch as grumpy old jerks, and we decide if we how they hold up one way or the other and what's changed. So, Mike, why don't you head us off?
It was this was a required viewing for me when I saw it the first time, and I remember being with a buddy of mine. We just laughed so much, and then I ended up seeing it with like another group of people like a week later. I was like, it was kind of a word of mouth. I know it didn't have much of an opening, but this movie had legs, I think, in the theater as far as how long it lasted, because I saw it at least 3 times in the theater for like 3 different groups of people, and it was, every time I watched it, just whenever Michael Keaton came on, it was like...
Yeah, when you go to 8 million on the opening weekend, you typically half your audience every week after that to get 75 million, it was in the theaters for a long time.
Yeah, and there were so many quotable like little sayings he had in there stuff. I remember just that whole summer just quoting from it. But it's one of those, like, I think I told you before we started this podcast that this was the movie I probably knew the best, because this is one of the few that I'd seen a lot in the theater, and like I knew these lines by heart. Even watching it today again, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And funny thing is, I just watched the sequel at the theater earlier today. I did it in reverse. I watched the sequel and then I watched the original after I got home.
So where'd you get that from?
I know, right? I'm always leery of sequels and reimaginings and that kind of stuff. But I'm glad, I was glad to see the sequel because it had so many Easter eggs and so many relations to the original movie. The visual, that German expressionist kind of,
grotesque.
The grotesqueness of the bureaucratic office and stuff. It was a little bit tamer in this one. They'd kind of, it was less Tim Burton-y, if that makes a word. It's like it's kind of like listen to a Rod Stewart song from 1971 as opposed to a Rod Stewart song from 2001. It's mellowed a lot, and I felt that way about this Beetlejuice movie, even though it was a well done story. And for a remake or a sequel in these days, it held up really well. Okay, and then they had, as long as you had Michael Keaton, the makeup he had on, it was hard to tell he had aged a year in 36 years, That was very convenient, and they had Winona Ryder as a mom now, and of course they had another kid, and of course Catherine O'Hara was at the back, and they had so many references to the movie that it was to the original that was really well done. They tried to also capture that music kind of like Harry Belafonte thing where the possession song, they had that. Of course they had a totally different, you'll never hear Richard Harris the same way again, but conveniently they were able to get Jeffrey Jones out of the picture, literally. You'll see what I mean. And it was just, but like I said, it was kind of missing the atmosphere of the original. Which, like I said, back to the original.
That's a tough ask to capture that.
To have the Danny Elfman music really helps. There was less of that in this movie, and I watching the original after the sequel was like, wow, okay, so this is it seems darker, it seems more visually artistic and not scary, but even though it's labeled is it labeled a horror movie or a comedy or a horror comedy? I don't know.
Amazon, they just call it anything.
Yeah, exactly.
All those things, yeah.
But yeah, I would recommend the sequel, and but watch the original first just to see a movie that made on a shoestring budget, and even with some of the effects, they held up pretty well. They were vastly improved, like the sandworms in the new movie, but
over the stop motion stuff,
the stop motion's got a charm to it, and even some of the effects they have, like they're looking in the mirror and they can't see themselves, just basic stuff like that they were able to do, just little magician kind of tricks in the original movie. So it held up, even like I said, even after seeing the sequel, seeing the original again, it had no effect on me. It was as good as I remember it in 1988.
All right, well, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
This was not one of my biggest hits back when I was a younger guy. From the ages like 16 to 22, I had really weird tastes, and I think because I was just kind of uncultured and not very sophisticated, and I just very black and white, and I was still at that age where I wanted things to be explained and make sense and have order to them. And I watched this as a VHS rental, I think, with a girlfriend's house one night. I did not see this in the theater, and she was the goth fan, and we were interested in these kind of things. So I watched it, and I remember that stream of consciousness thing. This movie just goes everywhere. Outside, there's another universe completely that just shows up. They jump in between planes of consciousness. They're singing calypso. I mean, it's all this stuff. And again, like I said, historically famously, I've got a problem with like mixing comedy and horror for some reason. I got over that since, but it just seemed kind of like mixed up and weird. I mean, it was an interesting watch. I mean, in terms of like the art direction and the cinematography and the music, and I mean, it looked cool. The colors were cool. All that kind of stuff looked great. Yeah. But from the story, it's like, okay, that was weird. But I didn't really think a whole lot of it. It wasn't one of the things I just cherish or put in my collection, my hard drive in my head. Did dislike it, probably 2.5 out of 5, 3, 5, whatever. So I haven't seen this movie that many times since that original viewing in 1988 or 9, whenever I saw it the first time. So watching it again a couple of weeks ago, start to finish on a big screen with my wife and with the music and all that. It's like I came around. Still, I still didn't think it was great, but that stream of consciousness was good to me now. It made sense, and I understood exactly what it's supposed to be. This movie doesn't need, linkage connecting. It just needed to be visual and show a very sparse narrative just to get you to the next interesting thing, and it does that very well. And that Elfman soundtrack and the Calypso soundtrack and all that stuff kind of pushes everything along. And again, those 14 minutes that Keaton are on there, I think are perfect. I think if he's in there anymore, it gets too heavy, right? It becomes Jim Carrey, Ace Ventura. But I think it was just a perfect little movie. I think it probably went up to a 3.5, 4 out of 5 on that point. So I did enjoy this second watch. And it was interesting seeing, films about death hit me differently now that I'm closer to it. But it was interesting to watch this take. And so there you go. Well, speaking of death in the afterlife, Mike, this is the time of the podcast where we do our little list and we take the thematic elements of the film we just watched and make a little funny list about what we just saw. So we decided we're going to talk about the afterlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
It kind of goes hand in hand with this movie, right?
So Hollywood's taken several viewpoints on what the afterlife could be. And this particular one is charming and fun, but oftentimes they're not the same way. Sometimes they're a little bit different, take a different tone. So we thought for this week's installment of You Just Made the List, Pal, we talk about our favorite movies about the afterlife, good or bad. So Mike, why don't you head us off? What's your first one?
I went with the rule of like, what is your portrayal of the afterlife? Kind of like, is it a bureaucratic office with, Sylvia Sidney and smoke coming from her trachea? Or is it something else?
So.
I mean,
I might have a chance there.
My first thought was Return of the King, 2003 movie, from Lord of the Rings. And in there, it's not about the afterlife, but, there is a section where it deals with Aragorn having to go recruit some more soldiers to fight back the orcs that Sauron is, in the mass army that, at the end of the movie that has to face them. And he's told to go to the Path of the Dead or Paths of the Dead. And he, Gimli, and Legolas go to meet these ghosts and try to recruit them. And it's an incredible scene where you realize these ghosts are actually being held in this like purgatory because of a curse and
a broken oath. Yeah.
And he's able to convince these guys, hey, you can be released from this state of, afterlife if once more ride with me, and we can defeat the evil, and then I will release you. And after some, some really cool like scenes of them trying to convince them, they eventually do, agree to go. And it's great because at the end they the scenes of them storming across those boats and then through the fields and just wiping out all these soldiers is great. And then they're granted their leave and or ascend to wherever they're at, the great beyond. And I thought that was a great depiction of at least a mythology of like soldiers in battle who've been caught in this world where did they where do they go now? Can they be, redeemed? And I thought that was an interesting story. And
that's a great pick.
Inside a really good story. Yeah, thank you.
That just gave me goosebumps. Wow, I didn't even think about that one. I should have. All right, well, I'm going to go a little more traditional. My first pick is going to be Here Comes Mr. Jordan from 1941.
Yeah.
This has been remade several times, including the Warren Beatty movie Heaven Can Wait, which we've talked about several times. This one stars Robert Montgomery as Joe Pendleton, who's a pilot, a boxer, he flies his plane into a precarious situation, and just before he crashes, his guardian angel, Claude Rains, in this case, who's a great actor of that era, pulls him out because he figures there's no way he's going to survive. And it turns out that he did not meet his end, and it put the universe out of order. So Mr. Jordan has to find a body to put Robert Montgomery and Joe Pendleton as they sort it all out, and he puts them into this Mr. Farnsworth, this millionaire's body. And then the second act is him like wanting to recapture his goal as a boxer and taking this Pendleton guy's body and getting into training, much like Warren Beatty did as a quarterback for the LA Rams. But it's a great story, and of course he falls in love and develops this relationship, and he's also being stalked by some of his cohorts.
Oh wow!
And they're planning on murdering him, and in the end of the second act, he gets murdered, and he has to go through the whole thing again, and then they end up finding him a real body to go to, and then the angst there is that he's developed a loving relationship that he has to like give up, and gets put into a new body, and then there's this beautiful scene at the end where Mr. Robert Montgomery in his new body meets the love of his life in a different form, and they just hint at them like understanding what's going on. It's just a fantastic movie. Warren Beatty did it just as well, I think in 1978 or 80 with Heaven Can Wait. Just fantastic premise. Also, a guy named Joe is kind of the same thing. Steven Spielberg used that for the film Always, but that romanticized view of being an angel and getting a chance to go back and get your life again. It's just very pleasing and very comforting. And that movie's just been the foundation for a lot of movies since then, and it's one of my favorites. So here comes Mr. Jordan from 1941. That's my first pick.
That's good. I haven't seen the original. I always, I just saw Heaven Can Wait, and I can't get around Buck Henry and James Mason, working for the Heaven. My second pick is I cheated a little bit. It's not a movie; it's a TV show. It'd be Lost. Whatever you say about the ending of Lost, it's an interesting depiction of. This is what I think. This is my opinion only. I think Lost was originally made for that ending where everybody is, that was in the plane had died and were in purgatory. I think there was a season 4 and a season 5 that were probably unnecessary, that, they just had to, almost fill an ABC quota to have more shows because it was so popular. So they had to kind of do some red herrings and some, cul-de-sac kind of storylines that didn't quite fit. And I think that's probably what hurt the show more than anything. But at the end of it all, you find out, like I say, that these people are very uncomfortable in the life they're living in their present situation once they leave the island. Yeah. And you realize, okay, well, something's going on with them. And then that's where you find out that there's this, it's very complicated. But like I said, I like the idea that more than anything that these people had been dead the whole time. That's kind of a neat theory to have and watch this show. Like I said, I just rewatched it a couple of years ago with my wife, and it was interesting to rewatch it knowing the ending and knowing, okay, hey, a lot of this doesn't matter because these people are already dead. So you're basically watching it to see that season 6 again and go, okay, let's see this whole Jacob and the devil battle again and Mother Earth and all. There's so many interesting threads in that show that are nice to ponder, and it's one of those shows that makes you talk. And in the end, that's why I liked it so much. There was so much meat in that sandwich to talk about, especially in like I said, the last season when you finally got to the point where the creators are like, okay, this is what we wanted to do the whole time. These guys are not alive or dead. It's been in purgatory,
right?
Which is fascinating, and they had to find their value and their meaning of life, and whatever you think about the show, it gets you thinking and talking. So there you go, Lost, the TV show.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, that was my next pick too. So rather than just give it up, I'm gonna share this one with you and just give you my take on it as well. So I thought I was cheating, but you beat me to it. So I brought up Lost because it's one of those shows I got so angry with. I hate watch the entire last 3 seasons because what triggered me was I'm currently watching a movie on Prime called From. And it's kind of the same premise. It's about this is
the Harold Perrineau. He's the Lost guy.
Sans Walt. It's by the people that produced Lost, and it had the same kind of hook. I watched the first episode. The premise is that these people travel around the country, and they're
stuck in like a town or something.
They get stuck in a town. There's a tree that blocks the road, so they turn around. They find this small town. But they can't exit. So like every time they try to leave, they just make this big circle and come back to the same town. And this town is inhabited by these ghouls that look just like people, but at night they take a different form. and it sucks you in just like those first episodes of Lost does.
Yeah.
The parallels there are just eerily similar. And my concern is that this wonderful show that I've just discovered is going to take the Lost route because it's got some actors and the same producers and writers. What got me about Lost was those red herrings you talked about. So I can take 3 or 4 things that you don't have an idea what's going on, and I can take 16 and I can take 17. But there's 135 or 200 things that you can't figure out, and they don't have any intention of explaining to you. That's when things are really cool like that if they can be explained by the writers. If you can trace them back to what they are. Anybody can make up stupid stuff like, hey Mike, I'm going to show up tomorrow with reindeer antlers and clown nose on tomorrow. That's weird. But if I explain to you why that's the case, that's even cooler. But if I just leave it out there, that's lazy and easy. And my fear is that this wonderful show I found From is going to take the same path, because I can already see it happening. Even in the first few episodes of the second season, they're introducing 5 or 6 new weird, what the hell does this even mean stuff, and they haven't answered any of the first questions yet. So, but anyway, that's that's good writing to some degree, whether you like it or not. If you can keep your audience engaged and
I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like Lost was appointment viewing, you know, like you would watch. They had cliffhanger endings. They had like these, especially like I said, season 4 and 5 had these just gonzo kind of storylines. You're like, where's this going to go? You know, and eventually ended up going nowhere, but it was still. It hooked you. You were hooked. You had to stay for the end of it.
Well, and I had the luxury of doing it. I was late to the party on Lost, so I missed like the first 3 or 4 seasons. So I had them going back. They were mailed to me by Netflix. I would get like the first 5 or 6 discs, and we would watch them the entire weekend. We'd start our evening at like 3 p.m. and we'd watch until 2 a.m. in the morning, and you could see these things. It was the first thing that was actually binging. It was Netflix and chill, 10 years before that was even a thing. And so that was probably the best way to see them. But so that's my second pick is also your second pick, Mike Lost. So let's go to our last pick, Mike, and maybe you have an honorable mention or two.
My honorable mention is a movie I saw that was very hokey, kind of corny movie. You know, it was called What Dreams May Come.
Oh God, yeah.
It was like the artistic style and the portrayal of like heaven and
it was like an oil painting,
purgatory, even hell.
Yeah.
Oil painting is a good way to describe it. I mean, the visuals were stunning. It was that's what kind of reminded me of Beetlejuice in a way. It was the fact the art made the movie. Like I said, this movie in particular was hokey. And kind of
disjointed, and it was Robin Williams and radio, and
it was during exactly it was during like the Robin Williams, Patch Adams kind of stage where he was doing
Goodwill Hunting stuff,
doing these kind of like not cheesy movies, but very corny kind of pull at your heartstrings movies that were almost like okay, but like I said, is very unique in its art style, and that's what stood out to me the most. I think like I said, story itself was so corny. But as far as my third pick for a depiction of the afterlife, it would be The Meaning of Life by Monty Python. I want to say this movie's from 82 or 83. But it goes through various it's basically a sketch movie where they just kind of string a lot of sketches about different things. It's very, if you're
satirical and
it offends everybody, which that's great because it's Monty Python.
Their only intention.
If you're Irish or Catholic or both, you really got offended. But what was so funny to me is the scene where they gets near the end of the movie where they describe death. They actually label it death, and they show the Grim Reaper walking around and knocking on somebody's door. And he's knocking on the door of this dinner party where they're all, it's all the Python troupe kind of eating, and they kind of, they're doing, and they're cross dressing as they're playing girls and but it's such a funny scene because it's traditional English humor where everything's kind of dry and the Grim Reaper actually walks into their house. Oh, is Mr. Reaper is here? Everything is so just casual. Oh, well, great to meet you. What is your trade? And they're asking these questions. He says, I'll come for you. And he points at what they're eating and says, you all died from eating the salmon. And they're like, that brings rather a pall to the evening. It's just such a funny scene.
Yeah.
And he escorts them away from the house, and they go to heaven, which their heaven is it's like a giant like Las Vegas review show, and and they sit down and they start watching the show, and it's it's like has like topless women, and it has Eric Idle come out singing "Every Day is Christmas in Heaven," and it's just such a funny scene because it just shows how happy everybody is just watching this Las Vegas show, and that's how they show the afterlife. Every day is Christmas.
I hope that's true. That's a great pick. Oh my. I just have a movie I got to watch tonight. That's great. My final pick is going to be kind of a cheap shot here, Mike, but I'm going to go with the Sixth Sense from 1990.
Oh,
I know you just saw an M. Night Shyamalan movie that you weren't very impressed with, but it was interesting to go back and watch the movie that really just put everybody, just turned everybody over on their ear. This was just one that just hit everybody. Yeah. This is one of those greatest endings ever. One of those things that just was so original at the time and just really put audiences through a loop. And I think just the impact of that ending enough gives this some sort of cultural relevance for sure.
Oh yeah, it probably made 90% of the audience want to go back and see it a second time,
just to go back and see what were all the clues, right? Yes, but it's Bruce Willis has a great performance here, as does Haley Joel Osment. And then if anyway, we don't want to spoil the ending, but it's been 35 years, guys. Give me a break. But it's interesting to understand how well crafted this was. It was almost you would have to like write it in reverse, and just to see all the things that made sense. And when you watch it in hindsight, like the 12 Monkeys did, Mike, or Fight Club, when you go back and watch these movies again after you know the twist, you kind of appreciate them more because you see all the work that went into it to hide or disguise or veil what the actual story was, and you can just appreciate those narratives a whole lot more. But the Sixth Sense was one of those things that just, he's stuck in purgatory, and he has like one last mission to do. And the others from 2001 is kind of like the same thing, where the ambiguity of the afterlife. I think that's very well captured there. And don't forget Chevy Chase and O Heavenly Dog, Mike. He has to go back to solve his own murder, but he does it in the body of Benji the dog.
Oh yes!
Imagine the pitch for that in 1980. All right, so we got Chevy Chase, guys. So we want you to give us like $80 million.
Well, if we combine the comedy stylings of Chevy Chase and the popularity of Benji,
that's right. Solve a murder mystery. Who wouldn't want to see that? But those movies that, like Jacob's Ladder, comes to mind too, or just the ambiguity of the afterlife, not knowing you're dead and all that kind of stuff. That's always been inherently creepy to me. And when they pull out a really good story at the end of it with good solid 3 acts and a real ending, I think that's always clever. So that wrapped up my pick there, and those are our favorite movies regarding the afterlife.
Nice. All
right, Mike. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up here. We talked about this Beetlemeyer guy long enough.
Beetlemeyer, yes.
We just want to talk about some other housekeeping notes, guys. So if you want to check out anything more about our show, you can obviously go to our Instagram page. That's Grumpy Nostalgia. You can check out our YouTube channel. Don't feel obligated. No one else does. If you can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com if you feel compelled to. If you're listening on the Buzzsprout web page, if you look under the title of each podcast, you see a send us a message link. If you want to click on that and send us a message, that would be cool. We'd really appreciate hearing from you. And that should do it, Mike. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I just want to let everybody know that my whole life is a dark room. One big dark room.
Okay, I believe you. All right. So for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.
And remember, I'll eat anything you want me to eat. I'll swallow anything you want me to swallow. So come on down now. Chew on the dog. Oh!